So country singer Waylon Jennings said in his autobiography that he thought Jimmy Carter was too good of a man for the job, that Jimmy Carter was too decent and honest to be president. And when I first read that, I thought to myself, you know what, that's kind of sad, because it really shouldn't be that way. The more decent and honest you are, that should, push you to the top. That's who we should be led by. But instead, a lot of times what happens is no matter how good someone might be on the campaign trail, they do end up becoming corrupted by the office pretty quick, and they end up going against a lot of the things that they once preached for the loudest. They end up turning completely around and disappointing you. But I really don't think that Jimmy Carter ever did that. And I really believe, and I will die on this hill, that Jimmy Carter was the greatest human being to ever grace the Oval Office. I don't think that anyone had the morals and values that Jimmy Carter had. He led by example. He taught us how to live with humility and compassion. He taught us how to work with others. And he never gloated or bragged or thumped his chest about any of it. He never tried to sell us shitty merchandise, never tried to sell us a Bible. He just went out there and led his life by example, and if more people lived that way, it'd be a lot better world. So when I hear someone like Scott Jennings say what I'm about to show you, there's no way that I can let it slide. Even though this clip's a couple of days old, there's no way that I could let this pass and not bring it up. Because, folks, this is absolutely the best example I've seen in a long time of gaslighting. I've got the definition of gaslighting pulled up and ready to go. When you come back from watching this, I'm going to read to you the definition of gaslighting, and I'm telling you that is exactly what he's trying to do right here. Take a look.
President. That's why he lost in a landslide after his one term. And if it's possible, I think he was even a worse ex-president because of his meddling in U.S. foreign policy, because of his saddling up to dictators around the world, because of his vehement views, anti-Israel views, and more than dabbling in anti-Semitism over the years. He often vexed Democrats. Obama didn't even have him speak at his '08 convention. He put Bill Clinton in a terrible foreign policy box on a North Korea nuclear issue. I think he was a guy who had a huge ego and believed that he was uniquely positioned to do all these things, even after the American people had roundly and soundly rejected his leadership. So I respect people who run for president and get elected president, but in his particular case, I think he time and again proved why he was never suited for the office in the first place.
Yeah, there was no way that I could let that one slide and not do a video on it, so I went and pulled up the definition of gaslighting. Now think back on what you just heard him say as I read this definition. Gaslighting is a psychological manipulation technique that involves convincing someone that their reality is not true. The goal is to make the victim question their own thoughts, beliefs, values, and behaviors. Gaslighting is often used by narcissists to gain control over a target. The term gaslighting comes from the 1944 film Gaslight, in which a man tries to convince his wife that she is going insane, and the term became popular in the mid-2010s, and I can tell you it definitely became more popular when Donald Trump came along, because that's what he and Maga has been doing to us this entire time, and it is so damn exhausting. But I will give them this. They absolutely have caused me to question everything that I was ever taught and everything that I ever believed, because they're just constantly going for the throat in this manner. And they have gotten so good at gaslighting, to be honest with you, it's scary. But when I sat there and listened to him say that about Carter, I said to myself, okay, if someone just randomly played me this clip with no context whatsoever, I would have thought that he was describing Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump's ego would not let him go home once he lost an election. Donald Trump got defeated, and he couldn't accept it. And he went out there, and we had January 6th on his watch because he could not accept the results of an election, and he still won't concede the election to this day. And we've got a guy going out there cozying up to dictators, saying he wanted to be a dictator on day one, saying he wanted to terminate the Constitution. You want to talk about somebody's ego? You want to talk about somebody being too prideful? If I had heard that clip with no context, I would have thought for sure he was talking about Donald Trump. That is what gaslighting is. They're trying to make us question everything we ever believed and go, wait a minute, was Jimmy Carter really that good of a guy? And of course, if you go find that clip and look at the comments, there'll be people in there, yeah, man, he's speaking facts, truth, finally somebody said it. And a lot of times that's probably just bots trying to push that narrative out there and dupe people into thinking, oh yeah, well, maybe Jimmy Carter wasn't that good of a guy after all. But I just want to remind people that Jimmy Carter never tried to sell us a Bible. Jimmy Carter lived what the words in red said. Up until he was in his 90s, he was out there working and building houses and trying to help people and lift people up. Jimmy Carter lived the teachings of Jesus. out loud in front of all of us without ever thumping it. And I don't ever recall Jimmy Carter saying that he never asked for forgiveness. I don't ever recall Jimmy Carter saying that he never brought God into that part of his life. I don't recall there ever being stories of Jimmy Carter and porn stars and paying them off. I don't ever remember any of that. I don't ever remember Jimmy Carter being found liable of sexual abuse. I don't remember any of that. The only thing he ever said was that he lusted in his own heart. Which who out there hasn't done that? I've got a picture of Rita Hayworth hanging over my bed. Okay, guilty. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous that someone like that would sit there, and I don't know how that panel sat there and held a straight face while he spewed that bullshit. But that's exactly what it was. It was straight up 100% bullshit. But this gaslighting has gotten so tiresome. It truly has. But at the same time, if there's a silver lining in any of this, yes, it does. It causes you to question your own sanity. It causes you to question everything you've ever been taught and everything you believe. But then what it forces you to do is it forces you to study harder. It forces you to dig in deeper. I have a copy of the Constitution here on my desk. I have a copy of the Bible in the drawer here beside me. I am constantly reading those documents again and again to get a better understanding of it. I am more in tune now to our nation's history. I'm more in tune now to everything that's going on today politically. And yeah, it gets very stressful at times. There's times it gets very heavy and weighs very heavy on me, and I have to pause and take a break and walk around in circles. I really do. But as tiresome as this all has become, it's forced me to be a better person. It's forced me to try to educate myself even further because, folks, I'm going to be brutally honest with you. I didn't go to college. I barely made it out of high school. Okay, I was one of those kids, I truly believe they just passed me to get me out of their face. I really do. Back then, all I had on my mind was playing music. I just wanted out of high school. I didn't want to think about school again. I was a kid who was writing song lyrics when I was supposed to be doing my work. I would have my worksheets up on top, and I would be lifting up the worksheet and writing song lyrics on a paper, and all I wanted to do was get out there and play my guitar and never look back at school. But I was always a reader from the time I was a kid. I was always studying our history. I was always a history buff. I always made A's in that. I was always studying how our government worked. I was always studying politics. I was always trying to develop a better understanding of it. And I had a grandpa, I had a grandmother, and an uncle, and a mom, and later on a high school history teacher who was very influential in helping me to find the right books to read. And a lot of those books I'm sure are on the banned list today. But I spent a whole lot of time reading and studying things for myself. And then what I learned out of high school was pretty much street smarts. I pretty much just learned how to live out in the world and how to take care of myself and how to figure out things as I went. So I take something like that very offensive when someone tries to gaslight me that way, because I have struggled my entire life to get where I'm at. And I know when someone's talking down to me. And I know when someone's gaslighting me, and that's why there was never a Trump sticker on my truck. That's why there was never a flag flying off my house, because I never went in for that. And if you want to talk about egos, I can't believe you talk about Jimmy Carter having an ego. That's so hilarious to me. You want to talk about egos, and they have stores in my part of the world, Trump superstores, and they walk in there and they buy all this ridiculous merch with his head on Rambo's body, and they want to talk about an ego. They want to talk about this little peanut farmer just over here listening to some Almond Brothers and doing the right thing. They want to talk about that, and they want to ignore everything Donald Trump's done and give it a pass. And you know why they turn a blind eye to all of it? Because he empowers them to be just like him. And they want to dodge accountability. You see, if they had to follow after Jimmy Carter and they had to follow his examples, they'd have to be better people. They don't want to do that. They want to be able to have no accountability whatsoever, too. They want to be able to dodge any and all responsibility and accountability because they're the party of victims. They're the party of poor, poor, pitiful me. That's what they've become. And so if they had to follow Jimmy Carter, they would have to live a cleaner life, and they don't want to do that. So it's much easier for them to follow after someone like Trump, who then they can just turn around and be the biggest jerk ever, and people will pat him on the back. And they can go to their churches and stand around and shake hands, and they don't have to live any of it. When they walk out, they can go down to the Cracker Barrel and talk to the waitress like she's a dog. They can do that when they get out of church. No big deal. They can do it now. Used to, people would look over at them and frown, but now they've got a savior that just gives them a pass for all that. Well, we've got Jimmy Carter. And we will always have Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter may no longer be with us, but he lived a hell of a life. And he left a hell of an example for us to go by. And if we aspire to be like him and we aspire to live a life like him, then we're going to be better people because of it. And our children is going to remember us better because of it. There's going to come a day if we follow the way Jimmy Carter lived and aspire to be half the man he was, there'll be a day where our children will say, you know, my dad and mom did the best they could. But there's going to be a whole lot of kids years from now when they realize that their parents got duped, and that's the part that eventually will happen. There will be kids out there eventually that'll go, damn, my mom and dad sure got duped by this bullshit. It ain't never helped us in our part of the world. Well, this channel will be standing here and these videos will be standing here as a reminder that at least one hillbilly didn't get duped. And there's a whole lot of us that didn't get duped either. That's one thing I want to point out. Tennessee may be a blood red state, and I may be sitting in the buckle of the Bible Belt. I really am. But there's a whole lot of good people here who are sick and tired of this roller coaster. There's a whole lot of people here who are sick and tired of being gaslit. This election may not have went our way, but that doesn't mean we're going to lay down. It doesn't mean we're going to curl up in a fetal position and die. We're not. We're going to keep moving forward, and we're going to keep aspiring to be like Jimmy Carter. And when the history books are written, if we still have them, history is going to record Jimmy Carter as the greatest human being to ever grace the office. And history will sit and study Donald Trump the same way we study 1930s Germany. Like, how in the hell did that happen? There will be psychologists study this for years to come, and they will point out the way that they went about gaslighting and manipulating everybody. There will be documentaries. Like, you think Jonestown and the Manson family has documentaries? Maga will have more once the dust all settles. There will be people for years look back and go, how in the hell did that happen?